This is from DawgStats, Speakeasy Sports. And again, we shared some of this stuff previously, not here on the channel, but over on Twitter, talking about returning production within the SEC. Really cool database with all the rosters updated. Been some updates that have been had to made for a few places, so some of this could still be adjusted as we go further into the offseason. Obviously, keeping track of every single team is difficult, and then sometimes data just doesn't like to transfer over. Well, I think that was something that happened with one of State's guys. Is like he tried to add him in, and it just went to the wrong place. But State's numbers should be accurate at this point. And I thought I would just go through. We'll look at offense and defense, where they stand on some of the bigger returning production numbers. And offensive line, and I guess they've kind of fallen back down again because I believe they were up to 10 previously. Mississippi State, number 13 in the SEC in terms of returning offensive line snaps, with about 4,800 coming back. South Carolina leading the way with over 10,300, by a wide margin. Carolina lost like 9 linemen to the portal, and yet is leading the SEC in returning offensive line snaps because the portal class they brought in. They added a lot of guys that have played a whole lot of football, which I think is a smart move. It's an approach I think more teams should try to employ moving forward. But for Mississippi State, you don't have a ton of experience in this group, road to the SEC. Cannon Boone and DJ Chester have both played a pretty solid number of reps. Both of them essentially have like 1 year worth of starting and then another year of getting decent backup reps. Outside of that, Brandon Snee has played a lot, but he's played a lot at lower levels. So how does that translate up in terms of FBS snaps? I guess that's another question. But Miles McVay, has not played a ton. Got some valuable reps last year for North Carolina, but was not a starter, and really saw more action late in the season. LJ Perdome not played a lot. Blake Steen has played a lot, and that's a guy whose numbers are going to help you out here. But it's not a ton of experience for Mississippi State on the offensive line. And that's one of the things that is a little bit concerning when you talk about that group is you don't have an offensive line. And let me make sure I'm scrolled down so you guys can see that. You don't have an offensive line that's just loaded with a bunch of guys that have played a whole lot of football, which I think probably would have been the best course of action for State in terms of filling out that room. We've talked about it a lot. They added a lot of guys who have higher upside, higher ceilings. It's a lot of young guys where, hey, if it clicks for Mario Nash and for Tyler Miller, those are guys that could be really, really good players for State down the line. But they haven't gotten there quite yet. So what are you getting out of this group moving forward, or for 2026 rather? It's kind of still a question what that's ultimately going to be, because you just don't have a ton of guys who have played a bunch. I think Cannon Boone and Chester are both solid SEC starters. If you get Chester, playing guard, which is where I think he's going to be. I think Blake Steen is probably a solid power conference level starter. Okay. But is he going to play guard or tackle? And missing last year with injury, how does that impact him? Is Miles McVay ready for that next step? I think he showed some good potential late in the season, a guy that can probably be a solid starter, but he just doesn't have the reps. And O-line reps is such a big part of it. The reason the production number here is O-line snaps, one, that's kind of how you have to judge it. They don't really have a lot of counting stats for offensive line. But generally speaking, the best performing offensive lines are the groups that have guys that have played a whole lot of football, because it is a position where so much of what you do comes down to how you play as a unit. It comes down to understanding, when I get this front across from me, here's how I have to handle it. When I get this pressure look from a defense, this stunt, this is how I have to handle it. And when I'm working next to this guy, okay, we need to double team and then climb to the second level to this guy. There's so much that comes together for O-line play. It's not as simple as be bigger, faster, stronger than the guy across from you, where some positions just operate in space and you can kind of just say, be the best athlete, go win. O-line, that continuity together matters a lot. It's tough to get that continuity in this era where guys transfer so much, which is why the best thing that you can have going for you is having a lot of guys in the room who've played a lot of football. But State's kind of not there. So that's going to be interesting. They are very clearly looking at about 5 guys that they are really going to need to play well for them in all likelihood. Passing yards, State's number 7. You can thank Jaden Rashada for much of that. That's where Rashada really leads the way. But that's good for State. I think that is a sign of the depth of the quarterback room that you have. That it's a new starter at quarterback, but you still have a lot of production in the QB room from a passing standpoint. Number 6 in passing touchdowns with 37. You've got a good bit of production because you've got guys who have played a lot of football in that room. So that is a good sign for what you have behind Kamario Taylor, that you are not putting it all on him, that you just have nobody else that you could possibly lean on. And again, Kamario is going to be the guy at quarterback, but again, if Kamario goes down, you have solid options to turn to. Obviously, that's what we're just talking about. And you also have guys who have been around the sport that Kamario can lean on a little bit as he learns and as he grows in that spot. From a rushing yardage standpoint, down at number 10, again, this is one where a lot of it is Fluff Bothwell. A lot of it's Kamario, to be honest. But it's heavily based around a couple of guys because you don't have a ton of experience in that room outside of your top guy and Fluff. And at this point, look, Fluff, third-year college football, been a very productive running back at this point in his career. You know what you got there. But after him, Xavier Gaden's a guy who has shown flashes. There's a lot of excitement for what Gaden can ultimately be. He hasn't quite shown it yet as a guy that you can truly count on. Is he going to take that step forward? Colin Wilson hasn't really gotten on the field. So it's a couple freshmen that you're looking at and how they step in. Now, look, rushing yards, returning. A lot of times, rushing offense can be a product of scheme more so than talent. That's why teams sort of devalue running back, which does seem to be changing. To be fair, we are moving back to where running backs matter once again. So don't let me get caught behind in a purely analytical way of looking at it. I'm not too worried about where they're at from a rushing standpoint, but look, sure, they're not super high in that. And then rush touchdown 8th with 22. Receiving targets, I think this is an interesting one, and you kind of see some inexperience once again. And it's interesting because we feel good about this group, but Mississippi State is 12th in the SEC with 356 receiving targets. And keep in mind, pretty much all of those, not all of them, but a lot of those are for Aiden Williams. Sorry, Aiden Williams, God. Anthony Evans last season. Because keep in mind, he did not play much at Georgia his first couple of years. Then last year becomes a guy who catches like 80 passes for the Bulldogs, was heavily involved. Aiden Williams has played a good bit at this point. Marquise Johnson's been kind of heavily involved. So I think you've got a couple guys, but you need talent to step up at receiver. You don't have a super proven receiving room. You have a proven leader, though, that I think you feel good about. You've got a guy that, in Marquise Johnson, who I would say is a proven player in the extent that when he has gotten opportunities, he's taken advantage of them. He just didn't get enough opportunities at Missouri, thanks to the quarterback play that he was dealing with. But he's not been a featured player yet. I think you feel comfortable here, though, as well. And looking at receiving yards, State's actually down at 13th at just under 3,000 yards. Receiving touchdowns, 14th in the league with 16. There's not a ton of returning production in the room, but there was not a ton of returning production at wide receiver last year. There was practically none. And that group still turned out being even better. I think you feel good about the skill talent at State, right? The numbers where they're at don't really worry me. I think State's got guys that within this system are going to thrive from a skill position standpoint, even if there's not a ton of experience across the board at those spots. O-line is what scares me. That is what's scared me previously. That's what's going to continue to scare me until I'm given a reason to believe otherwise. I'm going to need to see that room put something together. Going over to the defensive side of the ball and looking at overall defensive snaps, this is where State's in a very interesting spot. And this is the one that I think is most important to me. State has close to 13,000 returning snaps on defense, which is number 6 in the SEC. And, they're losing some guys who played quite a little bit of football for them this past season on defense. Defense is another spot where playing a lot does matter because defense, it's two things. I was going to say it's two things, talent and experience. Obviously, that applies for football as a whole. We talk a lot about defense, and I've mentioned it many times on the show that there's a pretty strong correlation to defensive success in recruiting rankings because of how much defense does come down to athleticism, because it's a reactionary style of play. You have to react to what the team opposite of you is doing on offense, which means if you're going to handle that well, you better be a pretty good athlete. And great athletes are rated highly as recruits coming out of high school. So if you having a bunch of old guys who aren't very good athletes, probably not going to do you well on defense. However, there is a point that there's several key positions on defense where really it just comes down to, can you be in the right place at the right time to prevent the big play? Don't get burnt. Don't give up a touchdown. Don't miss tackles. Not missing tackles, I'm not saying athleticism doesn't impact these things, but understanding your assignment, understanding where you need to be on the field, and understanding the right angle to take to get to a guy and wrapping up and making a tackle, that's where experience and that's where effort comes in. And State having the experience that they do on defense is going to be big. They've got guys who have played a lot of football on this defense. You look at the linebacker room. You look at the secondary as a whole. D-line definitely needs some more experience there, but you've also got a few guys who the past couple of years have played quite a bit. There's a good bit of experience on this Bulldog defense, and that's some reason to be excited with Zach Arnett stepping in. You look at overall tackles, they're fourth in the SEC, 871 in returning tackles. That is something to look at to give you some excitement. Hey, this thing could take a step forward where this defense is going to be next season. Having that much production coming back at that position, that side of the ball, I think you've got a defense that you've got something to work with. Now, some of these other numbers with the sacks, the interceptions, passes broken up, sacks are pretty down low, 9th, which is not surprising. Interceptions down low because they haven't picked up a ton of passes. PBUs 10th. There's a few of these looking through State's roster. I don't know if the numbers fully add up correctly just yet. I feel pretty good about the snaps and the tackles overall, though, where they're at. So some of that stuff may still get adjusted moving forward. But again, snaps and tackles are the two big things I'm looking at, especially from passes broken up and interceptions. I mean, look, some of that's being in the right is kind of luck. Kelly Jones was tied for the SEC lead in pass breakups. You know what you have there. Quentin Taylor led Iowa State with pass broken up last year. But you've got a safety group that has played a ton of football. You've got a linebacker group of guys who have played a lot. That back seven of the defense is something to be very, very excited about. And those are safety and linebacker especially. This is the great thing for State. Safety and linebacker, those are two positions where experience can sometimes outweigh raw talent, because those are two spots where it is literally assignment football. Yes, being a great athlete still matters. I'm not saying it doesn't. But those are the two spots where it's about reading what you see from the offense and understanding where you need to be, go make the play. State's got guys who have done that. Now, corner, you need a big-time athlete. They've got that, Kelly Jones. And I think Quentin Taylor will be opposite of him as a good option. And then you got a couple young guys who are still some high talent ceiling guys. D-line, obviously, is where there's questions. But it's going to be as experienced a D-line room as they've had in a long time, for what it's worth. I know he's battled injuries, but Will Whitson's played a lot of football. Trevion Williams has played a lot of football at this point. Calvin Dinkins finally got to have a full season. Dre Bledsoe's been around for quite some time now. DJ Reed got to be a part of a full season. Dalen Evans has gotten a lot of good reps at Texas A&M and is now stepping in. Jason Jenkins, not a guy I'm super excited about, but a guy that's played a lot of football. So you've got guys in that defense who have been around and are veteran players on that defensive line specifically. Now, obviously, you need raw talent. If you're just going to get knocked back off the ball, who cares, right? If you're not going to get any kind of push up front, how much does that really matter? But having guys who have played a lot now with better coaching, I think there's a chance that you get another step forward and you get solid, serviceable defensive line play. This State defense, I've said it a few times on a few pods, I'm very sneaky excited about what Mississippi State could be defensively. I'm not saying this is going to be a great group. I'm not saying they're going to be upper tier in the SEC, but I think State's got the ability defensively to take a really nice step forward. And if you get solid production out of the offense, and you take a big step forward on defense, it could be a fun year. Solid Verbal podcast. Something I believe Dan Rubenstein on the show always talks about is something he always looks for is the combination of quarterback and defense for teams that he's interested in. Do you have a special guy at quarterback? Do you have a defense that can make a lot of plays? And look, State's got questions both, right? We're super excited about Camario, but you've not seen him as the full-time guy. The defense could take a step forward, but they got a long way to go. But the potential is there for that combination to come together. So I think the returning experience back on defense is a really good thing to be excited about. If you pair that with a transcendent QB, there's a chance for an exciting season.